and welcome. It is World Book Day and I want to share just 10 books I think you should read. They don't have to be 5 stars, some of them aren't. But these are 10 that I just think people should read. Now you might notice that this shelf behind me is empty. That is because I decided it would be a great plan at the weekend to reorganise my bookshelves, and I've done 3 shelves and I'm on this one, and all my Illumicrate books are piled on the chair just sort of behind where my phone is. These are in no particular order, and let's begin. So we are kicking off with a Stephen King, and that is Dolores Claiborne. I love reading this book. She is such a strong character. So Dolores at the beginning is in a police interview room, and she is there because her employer Vera, who she has a tumultuous, argumentative history with, has gone down the stairs and broken her neck, from what I remember. Or she's found dead in some weird circumstances. And Dolores is blamed for her death because of their history together. Throughout this interview, there are no chapters at all. It is just one long book because it's an interview, a taped interview. And she talks about her life because, she did not murder her employer, but she did murder somebody else. And for damn good reason, because her husband, Joe, I think his name is just a horrible, horrible person who does unspeakable things, and she's right to kill him, but it's the way she does it. It's the whole thing about it. It is just glorious. There are elements of the supernatural in here that are hinted at. Well, it wouldn't be King without it, but it is mainly to do with the horror that humans will inflict on each other, and the horror that we internalise either out of guilt or externalise out of hatred. And this, I think it's an underrated King gem, and I think more people should be shouting about this one. I'll put them up there so it won't look so cavernous and empty. And I can keep count of how many I've got. So next up we do have a new favourite of mine. One that I only read at the beginning of January this year, and that is The Last Hour Between Worlds by Melissa Caruso. I love this book so much that it came in the Illumicrate box, I read that one, and then I went to Waterstones to buy this copy as well, because you can never have too many editions of your favourite books. This has everything I wanted. I didn't think I would like it going in as much as I have. It's got time travel, a little bit of mythology, and fae. Our main character is Kembrel, and she is a member of the Guild of Hounds. She ends up going to this ball. It's her first time out after having her child, and she just wants to get out, but there's something going on. Something really isn't right. People get killed, and there's different echoes of reality. I think there's 12 different echoes of reality. We are in the top one, the normal one like now, and every time the clock chimes, the reality gets dropped down a layer and events unfold, but there are little changes, and that Kembrel and her friend Riker have to find out what's going on for a start and find a way to stop it before it gets to the last layer, because it just gets even more dangerous the more down you go. Souls are at stake. There's very high stakes in this. Everybody is a player in the game, and I think more people should read this. So next up we have The Queen is Dead by C.H. Follen. This is an indie book. She's an indie author. Absolutely fantastic. I got this as an ARC in 2023, and I just had to go out and buy the hard copy when it came out. Because I love the cover. I mean, look at this thing. I love the cover of it. This is a historical fiction regarding Lady Macbeth. This is not a reinterpretation of the William Shakespeare play or that character. This deals with the actual historic character of, I've got to try and pronounce this right, Gruach. Probably butchered it. I'm not up on my Gaelic. But this goes from when she's going to be married to somebody else, and she does marry somebody else, and Macbeth's sort of in the background, and there are so many traumatic events in here, and it does lead into what happens in the play because it's historical fact. Shakespeare didn't just pluck the idea just out of nowhere, it is actual recorded history. And this is a marvellous, marvellous adaptation of her life. And I would encourage, if anybody's interested in Lady Macbeth, this is a book that you really, really need to read. So next up we have the first book in a series, and while most people were loving Twilight, it didn't really grab me the way it seemed to grab other people and the way it grabbed my best friend. But what did grab me, which was out around the same time, was Fallen by Lauren Kate. The cover grabbed me for a start because this is just my vibe. This is the first of a 5-book series, and it details Luce is sent to boarding school. She's sent to Sword and Cross because her boyfriend, they think that she killed him because they were out secluded together and he ended up burning to death. Just flames, and she doesn't remember. So she gets sent to boarding school, and there she meets a host of different characters. There is Ariane, Roland, Cam, and Daniel. And she feels inexplicably drawn to Daniel in particular. There's something about him. It's like she knows him, but she doesn't. And she just becomes a little bit obsessed, but they are teenagers. This is definitely YA fantasy. YA romantasy even. In fact, I'm just going to say it's YA romance. Now, it does have some, not exactly fantasy, but it's not exactly mythology either. But if I said anything, it would spoil it. This, I was hooked on this. I have read this so many times. This book, I've thought about upgrading a copy, getting a new copy, but I just can't part with them. I broke the spines, so yeah, I don't know whether you can see that on the light so much, but the spine is completely broken. It's a bit yellowed, it's a bit aged, because I've had it years. It came out in 2009, and I love everything about it. It has danger, there's a mystery. I thought I'd solved it, but I really didn't. And it's very twisty. The whole series is very twisty, and I practically inhaled this book. And I inhaled the rest of them as well, because I could not rest until I finished the series. But if you are into romance, this is one that probably might have fallen by the wayside. I don't see many people talking about it, and I cannot get enough of this. I am planning to reread the whole series this year because I haven't read it in years. It's over probably at least 10 years since I've read any of these, and I want to reread them and see if I have a different perspective. But I think more people should have read this, should know about this. It is, just because it didn't get a big blockbuster movie doesn't mean it isn't better than Twilight. Because it is. And it does the whole sort of magic mythology aspect a lot better. There's so much in this, but if I say much more about it, I'm going to spoil it, and I don't want to spoil it. Now, another one for historical fiction is Lady of the English by Elizabeth Chadwick. I have so many Elizabeth Chadwick books down here, but this one is a firm favourite because this details the life of Empress Matilda. Now, if you're not up on English history, I don't blame you. Matilda was the only daughter of King Henry I of England and granddaughter of William the Conqueror. She was married to a German emperor I think she was sent abroad at 9 years old. She was sent away from her family, away from the country, and she is empress over in Germany until he dies and she comes back. But the country she comes back to as a 20-something woman, she is now her father's only heir, her elder brother William having drowned in the White Ship that went down between England and Normandy because they were all drunk and they ran it into a load of rocks. Everybody drowned, including Henry's only son. So Matilda is now heir to the crown of England, and this is around 1125, hundreds of years before Elizabeth I, and England certainly cannot stand having the potential of a woman ruling on her own without a man. But Henry makes them swear that she is going to be queen after his death. But of course, after his death, his forceful personality cannot enforce any of the vows that people have said to. It breaks out into a civil war because she is in Normandy when he dies because she is married to Geoffrey of Anjou. All that war breaks out because her father's died and no one's told her until Stephen, her cousin, Henry's nephew, goes in and takes the crown. And he is firmly established before anyone even tells her that her father's dead. So, and of course, people are split down the middle because they vowed to uphold her claim, and there's the rest that say, well, she's a woman, she isn't capable of ruling. All out war breaks out, it's neighbour against neighbour, and this is real history. The civil war between Matilda and Stephen I think it dragged on for about 19 years. It is so interesting. She was such a strong historical character. I think everybody who is either interested in English history or interested in royalty should read at least this one. And side note, Matilda was the mother of Henry II, who married Eleanor of Aquitaine and fathered Richard the Lionheart and John and all the rest of them. So there is a whole Plantagenet thing, and I find it so interesting, and I could just sit and read it and talk about it for hours because I love English royal history. It's so intricate, the Plantagenets are so petty and squabbly and just vindictive and mean, they are just so interesting. And to know that there were real characters, real people who did these real diabolical things is just so interesting to me. Next up, we are back in the realms of fantasy with Witch King by Martha Wells. I didn't know whether I'd like this going in. The cover doesn't wow me. The blurb interested me a little bit, but I went in unprepared for being impressed, and it impressed me. It is just pure fantasy from page 1 to the last page. There's no romance, which was really refreshing. It is just action, 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 and I loved it. And book 2's coming out this year, so I love it even more. This is just, it's so interesting. Kai is a Witch King, and he's dead at the beginning of this. And he gets brought back to life because of a sacrifice and a blood magic ritual that goes wrong. And he wakes up and he wants to find out who killed him and his friends, because they're all awake back up as well, and why. There is a lot of political manoeuvrings going on in the background of this, but it is pure fantasy, action all the way. Love it. So next up, we are back with the romance with Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. This is a classic gothic tale set in Yorkshire. I love it. But this details the I wouldn't really call it doomed love. I wouldn't really call it tragic, because Catherine and Heathcliff are crossed lovers. I'm not going to say star-crossed, because they're just crossed. Their whole dynamic is incredibly toxic. It is not a love story for the ages. It is toxic to the nth degree. So toxic, in fact, that it crosses over 2 generations. So there's Heathcliff and Cathy and Edgar Linton at the beginning, and it is so interesting, and everything that they do, they just are not bad people. Well, I mean, the things Heathcliff does is pretty bad, but he is obsessed. He has obsessive love for Cathy, which she does love him back, but it is in a toxic, selfish way. She is inherently selfish as a character. She doesn't want him just because of his social standing, and she says that it would degrade her to marry Heathcliff. And so she marries Edgar Linton, has the money, has the status, but still wants what she now can't have. And when somebody else, which is Edgar's sister Isabella, gets seduced by Heathcliff, because he's only doing it to get back at Cathy and Edgar, and Cathy is incredibly angry that she doesn't want Heathcliff, but she does want him, but she doesn't want anyone else to have him either. And all of this toxicity gets visited on the generation after, the children of these people. It is a classic for a reason, and if you haven't read it, I highly, highly recommend that you do. Now back to a little bit of mythology. This is Ithaca by Claire North. It is Greek mythology, and it is written beautifully. This is the first book in the Songs of Penelope trilogy. I remembered eventually. But we have Ithaca, next up is House of Odysseus, and then we have The Last Song of Penelope. I would pick some of the other ones, except I haven't actually read them yet. So this, if you're interested in Greek mythology, if you want to just curl up, as Penelope is doing on this cover, with a book instead of needling a shroud, I would heartily recommend this book, because it's so interesting. Mythology is so interesting, and this, of all the Greek myth books that I have read, this is a standout favourite. And we are back with a Stephen King. Now this is Nightmares and Dreamscapes. It is a weighty collection of short stories. This was the very first King book I ever read. It's what got me into his writing. I was lent it at the time by my cousin. Just had a coughing fit. That is why this one is on the list. And it's what got me into his work. And I mean, look, I'm a little bit of a fan, you could say. But the short stories in this are just diabolical. So I'm just going to read out some of the short stories that are in this. So we have The Night Flyer, which is a serial killer in a little aeroplane that goes from a little airport to little airport, always in bad weather, and he's being chased by a journalist. And then we have Dedication, which is... Now, when I first read this book, I didn't really like Dedication because I was too young to understand what it was. And what it was is disgusting. This is the story of a maid in a hotel, and a famous writer is staying there, and there's some kind of wish, or she makes a pact, or she has a lucky coin or something, and she ends up eating something, and she's pregnant at the time, but she ends up eating something and she thinks it's pregnancy cravings, and it's actually not. I didn't understand it when I first read it, but I reread it 10 years later. I understood it. And then we've got You Know They've Got a Hell of a Band. And that is chock full of dead rock stars. Elvis, Janis Joplin, so many others. And this couple just drives into this quiet small town. It's always the driving into a quiet small town because you're lost. And they end up meeting these people. And going to a concert at the end. So yeah, this is the first Stephen King book I ever read, and it is a firm favourite, simply because of that. And last but not least is A Cascade Blade by Benjamin Averill. Now this is the third and final book in the Rainfallen trilogy, and it is the end of an epic fantasy journey. It is full of English medieval meets dystopian future. And I might hear you saying, well, why are you recommending the third book in a series? Because I always recommend the first. And some of the other ones need a bit to shine. And of course, in order to get to this gem, you need to read the first two. So in a way, I am promoting them too as well. But this is so many series fall down at the end because people don't know how to finish something they've been working on for so long. King does it a lot. The cover is amazing. He's an indie author and he has a new series out this year. I think it's out right now. But this is the end of an epic series, and I was so satisfied at the end. I was practically lighting a cigarette in bed. I loved everything about this series. So those are my 10 recommendations, in no particular order, in no particular rating, but it is World Book Day, so have a happy time reading, and let me know down in the comments below some of your favourite books, or just some that you just like to read, comfort reads. I want my TBR to grow into Mount Everest and beyond. So enjoy the day and happy reading.
Castles glimmer on the hill, echoes of a life fulfilled. With the dawn, new hope is born. In this heart no longer torn. Sip the wine, embrace the night. Dark stars journey shining bright. Through the trials, through the pain, love and light shall still remain.